Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Uvani. So much is going on in the international scene. First off, Gabon's military leader Brice Oligui Nguema was sworn in over the weekend in a ceremony witnessed by Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima alongside other world leaders as well as thousands of Gabonese citizens. Nguema's emergence as president comes after the April 12, 2025 election, in which he beat 7 others to win. Nguema had been the interim president for 20 months following a change in government and ouster of former President Ali Bongo. In his inauguration speech, he promised to work hard for the development of Gabon, as well as empower the youth in order to secure the future of the nation. He promised to address the challenges of insecurity and criminality troubling the country, adding that the lack of adequate water supply will also be tackled. We'll have more on other discussions in diplomatic circles.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to retaliate against the Houthis after a missile fired by the group struck the grounds of Israel's main airport. In a video posted on social media, Netanyahu threatened strikes against the group, saying, "We attacked in the past, we will attack in the future." The missile, fired from Yemen by the Iran-backed group, landed near the main terminal of Ben Gurion Airport on Sunday morning. 4 people were injured by the blast, with another 2 injured on their way to a shelter. Displaced Gazans have voiced their daily struggles for basic healthcare provision at UNRWA medical centers amid severe medicine shortages over border closures. A visit to the UNRWA Al-Sharti Health Center in western Gaza on Saturday shows a range of patients, including pregnant women and children waiting to receive treatment as medical staff attempted to meet their patients' needs. The Palestinian news agency issued an urgent warning regarding critical shortage of medicine, essential food items and medical supplies. The agency cautioned of imminent collapse of Gaza's health system amid ongoing Israeli aggression, crossing closures and aid restrictions. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has vowed to take decisive measures against what he called the terrorists and those behind the scenes of the Pahalgam attack during a joint press conference with Angola President João Manuel Lourenço on Saturday. The remarks made during Lourenço's visit to New Delhi, during which Modi announced a $200 million line of credit to aid the modernization of Angola's armed forces. Earlier, gunmen in India-administered Kashmir opened fire on crowds of tourists, killing at least 26 people and injuring 17. No group has claimed responsibility so far.
Cross-border terrorism.
The much-expected minerals deal between the United States and Ukraine was signed on Wednesday. It will give the United States preferential access to new Ukrainian minerals deal and fund investment in Ukraine's construction. It is what U.S. President Donald Trump has been pushing for since he assumed office in January as he mediated in the Russia-Ukraine war. But in what might seem like the U.S. pulling out of mediations, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said hours after the deal was signed that there's no knowing when the war in Ukraine will end. Here's more.
It's one of the most bizarre things about the hex.
The U.S. Vice President's comment was made during an interview with Fox News coming hours after Ukraine signed a minerals deal with the United States. Included in the deal is development of mineral, oil and gas projects. The U.S. will provide either direct financial assistance or new military assistance to Ukraine, which will contribute half of any royalties from future oil, gas, and mineral licenses.
We have terrible recruitment problems in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. That's a great testament to his leadership.
The pact comes as America's access to rare earth minerals, which are key to manufacturing high-tech products like computer chips and military equipment, has diminished after China last month announced export restrictions on some of these minerals in retaliation for U.S. tariffs. Vance said the question facing the U.S. administration now was how it could help Russia and Ukraine find middle ground to end the conflict that has been raging for more than 3 years. But he says it is going to be up to Russia and Ukraine to come to an agreement and stop the brutal conflict. J.D. Vance has defended President Trump's approach to the war in Ukraine, though Trump has suggested this week that Ukraine might be willing to cede Crimea, which Russia invaded in 2014, in order to reach a truce settlement. But the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had earlier implied he would be unable to accept Russian control of the peninsula, citing the Ukrainian constitution. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced a temporary 3-day ceasefire from May 8th to coincide with anniversary celebrations marking the end of World War II. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha called for an immediate 30-day ceasefire in response.
Готуємось до важливих зовнішньополітичних подій.
On Sunday, the Ukrainian president declared that Ukraine is ready to move to a ceasefire as soon as possible. Even from that day, if Russia is ready to take minor steps, proposing a 30-day complete silence as he urged harsher sanctions to pressure Moscow into peace. He also called on partners to act decisively, warning that no one sees such readiness in Russia. On the contrary, he says, all their internal rhetoric is rather mobilizing. He says Russian propagandists continue to threaten not only Ukraine, but also its other neighbors, Lithuania and other Baltic countries. In the meantime, the Russian president expressed hope on Sunday that Moscow would need to use nuclear weapons in the conflict with Ukraine. Speaking in a documentary aired on Rossiya television channel, he said, "They wanted to provoke us. They wanted to make us make mistakes. The nuclear weapons that you just mentioned weren't needed, and I hope they will not be needed. We have enough strength and resources to bring what we started in 2022 to its logical conclusion, with the result Russia needs." Joining me now is International Development Analyst, Dr. Additional Fagbero Byron. He joins us from Abuja, from where he's been monitoring everything that's going on in Ukraine as well as in Russia. Thank you so much for making time to share your thoughts on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Marachi. Always good to be here. Thank you.
And it's great to have you. And I'm glad to be able to discuss this with you because it borders a bit on politics. It also borders a bit on international relations. And we have seen the Trump administration try to mediate between the war with Ukraine and Russia. And do you think that there has been progress of some sort before now?
Well, I mean, obviously, until the death of the Pope and the meeting between Trump and Zelensky, things pretty looked pear-shaped because you will recall their previous meeting wasn't very pleasant. And before that, as a matter of fact, during the sins of that, there was additional Russia bombings on Ukraine. But the Trump administration appears to have started rolling out some of its strategies since February 12, 2025 by making high-level outreaches both to Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, in terms of what America is trying to avoid is boots on the ground. And they're trying to work towards a ceasefire. Trump has always been saying that, look, these killings must stop. Trump being a businessman, I can understand why, no businessman. Well, businessmen can take advantage of crises, but it can be unending crises. And this is what we've seen in terms of the aftermath of the meeting in Rome between Zelensky and Trump. Essentially, what has happened is they have this new U.S. deal, U.S.-Ukrainian deal. And anybody who's been paying some attention for a while would know that that was where Trump was leading to. There are critical minerals in Ukraine, lithium, raft of minerals, which, and because of the global dynamics that is changing, America wanting to be less, engaging with China or less dependent. We say dependent, but the geopolitics is changing. You see, this world is of geopolitics is simply your enemy's enemy is my friend, my friend's enemy is my enemy. So when Ukraine, Zelensky tended towards embracing NATO, that sent a signal to Russia. And, experts all over the world, development experts, people like Jeffrey Sachs, they'd explained that sequence and all these issues and the controversies to do with the Ukrainians started since 1991 interpretation of, especially when the Cold War went down, and what both parties thought was supposed to be a detente, the point at which peace will arise. But having said that, a lot of things have happened. The world has known Trump is in place now. You have the president of the US that is soft towards Russia, or at least softer towards Russia, but is still carrying on the American agenda. You have the Russians too. You have the face of Putin there, but behind Putin, there are other people that a number of people don't want to or aren't in the spotlight. You had Medvedev, who is there, who is as hardline as Putin, and who used to be the Russian president at some point in time when Putin took a hiatus. So what you have now is a Ukraine minerals deal.
Yeah.
In all the parties, Ukraine is the weakest party, but it needs the U.S. to strengthen, its front on. So it will negotiate anything. So Ukraine has been forced, or at least put itself in a situation whereby it's forced to negotiate a joint reconstruction investment fund agreement.
Right.
With the US.
We'll be going into the deal in a second, but I wanted us to set the scene, for where we're at, how we got to this point, with Ukraine and the US signing that minerals deal. You spoke about a US agenda, and I'm wondering what you think that is, especially under the Trump administration. Under previous President Joe Biden, we saw a lot of support for Ukraine, millions of dollars in arms deals made with Ukraine being pumped into the country. I'm not sure they even have received half of even what they were promised under the Joe Biden administration. And I'm not sure that they're going to get much of that under the Trump administration. But what do you think is US President Trump's agenda in Ukraine or with Ukraine?
Simply put, the US wants to make more money. US has an economic issue to deal with. US is in heavy debt, although they still control significant portions of the world economy. He's got his tariff wars. And the background of it is his discontent with the manner in which NATO has depended a bit too heavily on the US. Trump is more nationalistic, more America-focused. And so he has sort of stepped down I wouldn't say the relevance, but the influence of his allies, traditional allies, in a manner in a manner that will strengthen his own direct agenda, the American agenda. America wants to regain some of the control that it has lost because it has diluted its powers with the European Union, with Europe. There are issues around, like I said, China is coming up as a major power. Trump believes that U.S. has been distracted, and because of that, it is losing ground, it is losing influence. And now this Ukraine things situation gets up. Now Trump is a businessman, and just like all businessmen, and as America did during the Second World War, you take every crisis is an opportunity for development. It's called building back better, or using your own self-interest. You help people resolve an issue, and then you take economic advantage of that issue. And Trump knows that very well. So for now, I don't think Trump has no apologies for any other person except the American agenda. And it's for America itself to survive, to retain its leadership, its global leadership in world economy and global political influence.
I can see why, the U.S. would want to get in on the action. As you rightly mentioned, China does have a huge deal of investments here on the African continent, and it does seem to be almost replacing that European and U.S. investment as well, even now more so because of the global trade tariffs that are ongoing, and with Russia staring the U.S. in the face and saying, we're not backing down from this. It's going to be even more difficult, I think, for the U.S. to be a bit more expansionist, I think, under President Trump, because he's the one who has ultimately stirred up this global trade war.
Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be difficult for them to be expansionist. That's why the strategy is changing. The strategy is changing to identify areas of insecurity where it is, if there was insecurity there were no minerals there, US would not be there. And they don't expand to want to govern like the British used to do in those days. They expand to make economic benefits. It's a whiffing thing. What's in it for me? Kind of intervention. So US will guarantee some amount of security. They'll have their bases there. For example, US has always wanted a base, a military base in Africa.
In Africa.
And exactly. So maybe that's where they're going. They're not very happy with what's happening in Burkina Faso because he's closed his doors to such. But if there is the slightest whiff of contention in Burkina Faso, you'll be surprised at what the US will do. They'll be there in the whiff of a hat, and I think, it's for me, if we're talking, if you would like to describe it as some kind of economic expansionism, yes, you're right. And if whatever can expand to the east will also expand to the west. And this is why, beg your pardon. Wait. And this is why we have to be concerned about where will the next wave of expansionism come? It's gone east of Africa. Will it be coming west?
I think that's a fair point. I think that is a fair point.
Yes. And when you look, if they're going west, guess where they're coming? Or guess where they'll be interested in?
You had wanted to
Nigeria.
Right, and you had wanted to talk about, what the takeaway is for Nigeria and all of this, gleaning from what's going on in Ukraine and now what's going on with the DRC. Also, of course, with the rest of Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and then Gabon, where there was a military leader who has now become president and was sworn in on Saturday.
Well, I would appeal to Africans to get governance right, representative governance. I don't want to, democracy means different things to different people. Democracy that does not deliver on its dividends, it's not really for the people. and a number of countries, try all sorts of mechanisms. For Nigeria has so much untapped resources, a number of which is known by the rest of the world and unbeknownst to us. Fortunately, now there's quite a bit done in Nigeria to actually unearth and define. Look, Nigeria has lithium, coltan, all those things that, without coltan, you don't have you don't have Tesla. You don't have your iPhones. Without tantalum, nubium, bitumen, all those things are in abundance in Nigeria. So having untapped reserves is enough. Then there are regulatory and security situations, issues that potentially, look, we've known that for the past 20, 25, 30 years, people have been taking out gold from Zamfara. The gold in Zamfara state is it's enough to build our own mini Fort Knox here. We have infrastructure gaps in Nigeria, just like Ukraine. What forced Ukraine to sign that agreement? They have the infrastructure gaps in terms of the ability to exploit. Ukraine is basically agriculture. They've done a lot of investment in agriculture. Truly, Ukraine is actually the food basket, the wheat basket of probably the entire world. But when it comes to solid minerals, they have gaps. Nigeria lacks downstream processing facilities critical for mineral exploitation, of which foreign partners are needed. And guess what? There are very people lining up. And then, of course, we have to be careful about exploitative deals. We don't want to sign deals when we are desperate. We want to sign deals when we are in a position of strength. Countries must avoid signing deals when they are desperate. It is at times like this, for example, that Nigeria should start considering what are the local value added it can do. Because before you sign deals, if you have local value added, if you have made provision for transfer of technology, if your mineral, for example, exploitation of mineral, if you are linking it up to trade, ab initio. And why I'm saying all this is, I'm a Nigerian. I love my country. But I can see, where, and we must learn. We have to learn from other people's mistakes. If we get ourselves into unnecessary conflict or desperate situation, people will sign anything they will need to sign. And Nigeria is so peculiar because of our, heterogeneous, our diverse nature. You don't want a situation whereby one state will sign with one country, independent of a federal, and then another state will say, because even if, for example, Nigeria's situation is very peculiar. If bandits, for one reason or the other, should capture a significant space of solid minerals and throw up the argument that they have been exploited and they have been, that they craft a narrative that shows some kind of oppression against them. And then they seek external support, contrary to what Nigeria is seeking. Guess what is, then there will be a conflict in Nigeria, almost akin to a civil war. And at that point in time, of all the minerals Nigeria has, Nigeria itself is not going to benefit more than 25% of everything. The rest of it will be paid to service those wars. So let us be mindful of the fact that we don't want to get into a situation where we are doing peace, where we are exchanging our resources simply because we want to keep internal peace. When we have an opportunity to keep internal peace or manage domestic conflict on our own, the long and short of what I'm trying to say is that negotiate from a position of strength. Let's learn from Ukraine. Ukraine was severely bombed before it got to where it is. And if it doesn't if it had resolved some of this problem, had negotiated probably well, maybe have made some concessions, who knows?
Right. Who knows indeed. And you're speaking from a place, a vantage position of former political presidential aspirant, as well as a political analyst and now international.
Candidate.
Sorry, a political candidate, presidential candidate, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
Former presidential candidate, as well as now an international development analyst. We appreciate your thoughts and your analysis on the issue. Thanks for joining us to discuss Ukraine today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amarachi.
And that's Diplomatic Channel this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.